oneness and ma'at. So I'm going to read some of this information in the hope that it brings forth some insight. And this is for all people. This is not just for black people. This is for white people. This is world history, people. I said we have to stop separating the history. It is world history. All right. So I'm going to read a snippet of it. I'm going to read the introduction. Yes, I am. So this book is called The Sybils, the First Prophetess of Mami Wata by Mama Zog Bey. So before there was, and this is as I said, it's a perception, it's a truth, whether you choose to acknowledge it, believe it, align with it or not. Don't judge me. Your reality is your reality. My reality is my reality. I'm presenting the facts as are. As I said, this is world history. World history. So this is not about separation. It is about oneness. We have to come to the place of oneness. Then we need all the facts, right? Disclaimer. So before there was Jehovah, a minor volcano, fire, thunder deity elevated as God under Afro-Afrim, which means Jewish, patriarchy, there was Mami, Isis, as the preeminent dual goddess and god who dominated the entire ancient world. And I will say this again, the dual goddess and god, because when you look at ancient Kemetic art, you see that Mut, who represents the mother, has both a phallus and breast and wings, representing that dualistic nature of God and goddess within the one flesh. So for more than 6,000 years, nearly all of Africa was matriarchal. The dominant presence of African matriarchy resulted not as a consequence of political, feminist or military usurpation, but rather because it was original and, more importantly, the natural divine order of the African civilized world. Okay? Its cosmology, philosophy, theology, ritual, practices, and rich African culture emphasize the complementary relationship between what has come to be known as masculine and feminine divine energies, as it exists in both nature and within the universe. What passes for traditional African culture today, where women have been subdued and relegated to marginal roles in African political and religious life, is the result of the patriarchal usurpation of the older matriarchal orders, upon which the patriarchs sought to contain and to control her divine powers and political and economic influence. Even I studied that the Marys who supported Jesus, and as I said, these are all stories, right? These women that walked with Jesus, they funded his organization. They were giving him their wealth and their abundance. Yeah? They weren't in a position of just being poor women that needed saving. They were the ones that were giving him spiritual food, physical protection, and financial support to his cause. These are things that you can go and research for yourself. All right? So women have always been abundant, naturally abundant. All right. So, however, hidden beneath the patriarchal substratum of modern day Africa, one will discover that it was under African matriarchy which birthed ancient Africa and Mediterranean culture and high civilization. Mediterranean culture as well. Right? So even the Babylonians are not separate from us, people. They're not separate. And Lil Enki, us. Yeah. So the first prophets of Mami were African women. I love that. The first prophets of Mami were African women. They were called Sybils. So you've heard of the Sibylline oracles. Check out the Sibylline oracles and you will see that there is a lot of evidence to suggest that the Sibylline oracles, the information written in the Sibylline oracles, was what was used for the plagiarized Bible, the plagiarized Western Bible, I would like to add. All right, the black Sybils were the black doves. They were the black women. Even in Greek times, even in Roman times, these black women's wisdom was sought. No king or queen, Herodotus and other of these Greek and Roman gods, they sought out the wisdom of the black women before they even went and did anything. How do you think Rome was able to conquer the world? The world. Think about it. Think about it. Keys open doors. Keys open doors. Nothing happens without that spiritual energy and power attached to it. Okay, so The first the first prophets of Mami were African women. They were called Sybils, meaning that they were Mami water priestesses and priests of the Oannes. Their prophecies are the oldest in the world. It is through their divine blood, the divine blood of these Sybil priestesses, that the patriarchal kingships of the pharaohs, the Hebrew prophets, and the Chaldean priests were born. And remember what I said, it is through the divine blood of these Sybils. Another reason why women have been vilified is because they are the first blood, the first sacrifice, the first blood. When you are born through a woman's blood, and that woman bleeds every month. That bloodlet represents two things. Number one, it represents the sacrifice of her divine self to split herself, right? So she was one, that's her divinity. She split herself. That's where you get man and woman, right? Male and female, the splitting. When you split, when you separate, you observe. You want to observe yourself. You want to see yourself beyond that which you are. You split in order to observe yourself. So that bleeding is representative of the cut, the wound between the divine goddess, which is masculine and feminine as one, now choosing to live itself in separation, so it can see itself, so it can observe itself. But then the second thing of that is that the blood is the sacrifice. So you see now with all of these other African spiritual traditions where they be sacrificing goats and all these kind of things. Why do you think they do that? The original sacrificial blood is the woman's blood, the menstrual blood. Yeah, you can do your research. It was used as one of the most powerful and protective forces in the world. They would put sacred blood on men who were going to war to empower them, to give them the spirit. Yeah, it's been seen as something that's nasty now. I mean, it's the purest fresh blood. Like when you are clean, it is pure. It's like fresh, powerful, life force energy. But you've been taught that it's nasty. And so then you become nasty. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's just ridiculous. So that's one of the reasons, because of the power of that sacrificial, pure blood, right? Pureness from which all things come from, which all things are created from. Every man goes through that blood in order to be born. Okay? Sorry, it's the truth. So we have to start being real. And blood is light. Blood is crystals. When blood dries, you can reflect light through it. When you look at it through a microscope, it has rainbow colors in it. Light. Your blood is light. You are a light being. It's not carbon. It's light, right? So we're giving birth, and that blood is light. That's the gateway. The waters, the primordial waters of Nun. But we've been taught that it's nasty. You know, if you're having a bingy, the woman can't come if she's on her cycle. Why? Because, I mean, I'm not saying this about the bingy specifically, but one thing I will say is the reason why a lot of women were excluded from certain rituals and gatherings was because the males wanted to do their own thing. They wanted to do things that were out of ma'at. They wanted to manifest things that weren't in alignment for what was best for all. They wanted to do it for what was best for them to be in power and them to succeed. A lot of the fights that you see between man and woman is because the males, and this is a story of what happened in Egypt, right? The male priests started to get upset and jealous of the women priestesses because everybody loved the women priestesses. And the male priests were like, hang on a minute, how come we're not getting that love like how you get the love? You know, and then they started to perform rituals where normally when they would make love in the morning, they would make love, and that would spread the energy of divine union to the consciousness of all of the people. That's what the purpose of the priest and the priestess's role was, right? To maintain the frequency and consciousness of the people, to make sure that it was in alignment with Ma'at. But what they did now is, because the men started to feel like, rah, you know what, maybe we need some of their feminine energy. We're going to move our energy center. So where we normally connect together in the heart, both of us in the heart, we're going to move our energy center. We're going to place our energy in the phallus, down in the root, so that when she comes to us in the heart, we can extract her energy. And it is said in that story that the angels then came and said to the priestesses, you need to be mindful because there's a deception taking place. And this was the first time that the deceit between man and woman came together. The woman was told of what, the priestess was told of what the plan of the priest was, and so she moved her energy center from her heart right, into her sacral. So the woman feels everything now, but she's not always connected to her heart. She's not in her heart space. So when they both connected that morning, that rising, on the top of Mount Sinai, they realized that they both duped each other. They realized that they had both shifted, and that consciousness now permeated to the people, that man and women no longer trusted each other. We were no longer meeting each other in the same epicenter. So I'm saying that this is some of the stories that help us to document and understand what took place, right? But there was a separation through deception. Where we were working together in harmony, now it was like, well, no, we don't want you to see what we're doing, because your energy is going to, is going to mess up what it is that we're doing, because what we're doing isn't actually in alignment with Ma'at. But at the end of the day, do as thou wilt. It came out of let's work in harmony because this is the way, to now do as thou wilt. We can now manipulate Mother Nature, and we can now take this knowledge and energy that we have, and we can become the gods. We don't need the women. We don't need that feminine energy. We can become the gods, and we're stronger than them. And the woman now has, becomes this pious, subjugated, Lilith, which is Lilitu, as I said, Lilitu, not Lilith, because she is our history. And that's what her name was, Lilitu, right? She was demonized. Oh, well, you can't be a woman that speaks up for yourself. Like I tell you, the optimal position for man and woman to make love is not with the woman underneath the man. It is with the woman sitting on the man, because the phallus is erect and connected to the source, and she is the yoni. So now you have a chalice, you have the ankh that connects you to the source. So how can it really be any other way? Do you understand what I mean? Like, you're descending your consciousness when you're trying to impregnate a woman and she's under you. So it's like all of this stuff was there to pander to this male patriarchal ego of trying to make themselves feel better about something, which, it's just stupid anyway, because we're all one. We work together in harmony, right? And so this is where the birth of all of this stuff came from. And women now became these dirty creatures who you can't allow into spiritual positions of leadership and all these kind of things, when they are naturally natural nurturers, natural caregivers, natural intuitives, right? I digress. So I'm going to bring it back to the book. There was a reason why the women were now pushed out of all of the religious practices, and I'm sorry to say that the Moors do have something to do with this as well, because they did subscribe to this particular kind of culture, and yeah, this is the information that I've researched and I've found, and this is what I've seen. So if you can tell me something different, then that's great. And I'm not using it, I'm not bringing it up to try and separate. I'm just trying to get the truth, so that we're not stuck in any kind of, oh, well, yes, no, you got to be a Moor, or you got to be this, or you got to be that. No, be yourself, like be your divine self, because with all these organizations, there's an agenda, and we're coming to a point of releasing all of that. Like, let's just deal with the truth so that we can get to healing, right? So I digress. Let me carry on. So, it is through the divine blood of these Sybils, priestesses, that the patriarchal kingships of the Pharaoh. Greetings, Hazel. Mwah, thank you. I need to speak to you, but the fact that you turned up right now is divinely aligned. Thank you so much. It's through the divine blood of these Sybil priestesses that the patriarchal kingships of the pharaohs, the Hebrew prophets, and the Chaldean priests were born. It was the Sybil's style of prophecy and magic that would later be limited by a militant faction from these groups, who were envious of her global positioning and rebelled against the divine matriarchal orders and seized their temples and overthrew their priesthoods as patriarchy began to dominate. Please, Hazel, do get in contact with me. I really need to connect with you. So I hope you hear how this energy started to transform and shift, from this understanding of these Sybils, these prophets, and now as patriarchy came in, these women became demonized and overthrown. So in their jealousy, hatred, and rebellion of her divine authority, the Levitical Jews elevated their original minor deity, Jehovah, as an insult to her. Together, Jehovah and his patriarchal clan usurped her sacerdotal and secular power, and from that moment on, they have worn it as their own. They did not create a new logos, they simply corrupted and repackaged the original as laid forth by the divine African mother. All right, to conceal their crimes, they destroyed and defiled her name and all of her temples. They murdered and accused her prophetesses and prophets of heresy and witchcraft, and disguised her sacred rites and divine legacy as their own. This trend of random destruction they continued so that the world would never again know or honor her as their divine African mother. Since their unauthorized acquisition of her divine authority, there has been little peace in the world. Because they have demonized the voice of her prophetesses and continue to enslave and oppress her prophets and people, there has been no divine prophecy. All that remains are hopeless corruptions of her original logos and weak imitators, says here, such as Nostradamus, of her divine prophetic style, a style originally developed by the Sybils and those of her sacred priestesshoods. The Jews, and I'm going to read this because it is written in the book. The Jews, whom after the 5th century BCE could neither speak nor understand Hebrew, nor the ancient esoteric philosophy of Mami, attempted to decipher the original cuneiform tablets of the Black Canaanites that predate the Hebrew language. Their crude translations deliberately corrupted many of the ancient names of the black goddesses and changed the original esoteric meaning of their prophecies to what exists now in the Torah and in the Pentateuch. As I said, do your research. These now corrupted and worn scriptures, doctrines, mass-produced and distributed now in the Judeo-Christian Bible, have now been the cause of untold human suffering, massive spiritual ignorance, spiritual suffering, devastating wars, and this was especially the case between the rebellious sons of the patriarchal Afro-Pharaonic orders, who themselves were overthrown and robbed of their secular hegemony by their illegitimate offsprings, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Though all latecomers into their very ancient and divine epic, their holy wars, claiming original ownership of the black goddess legacy, are centuries old and are all that is allowed to remain within human memory. They had to basically go across the world, bringing war to wipe out and bring forth their discourse, this truth that they wanted the whole world to subscribe to. Ignorant of the original logos established by the divine African mother, their present struggles to maintain the corrupted version which favors an exclusive